Hey, and welcome to the Disassembled Podcast, a show where John and I have a casual conversation discussing the comedy of errors that is American society. This week we have another installment of The Distraction of the Week.
I do think there's a small opportunity with the Panama Papers because they've announced that May 9th they're releasing, which is a Monday.
Yep.
Beginning of a work week, they're releasing a whole new dump. And I think there's a lot of interesting angles on it. I mean, and I guess speculatively, I assume there is some blackmail to this, where maybe I'm too conspiratorial in this view, but I think you say, oh, we're going to release it on this date. People who worked with that bank in the last few years know they're going to be on a list potentially. Might be able to contact them and get their name taken off the list. I don't know.
Yeah, but they're already on the list.
I mean, all right. You don't think the data could not be released or it could be deleted by someone on the inside? I guess it's been copied at this point.
Yeah, and at this point, what does it matter?
All right.
So I don't even think it's a big PR disaster. It's only certain people that it really affected, right? Like Iceland is the one that the media is always pointing out, like, oh, the Panama Papers shook Iceland to its knees and made its PM recuse himself or whatever he did, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas actually, it was more Iceland itself is still in the crisis. And that is very, Iceland would respond to this case much more than other nations. And that's definitely true. There's been scandals other than Iceland, but the governments haven't fallen.
Right. So those governments are probably in a less precarious state. You also had Ukraine had their prime minister resign because of this, but Ukraine is in a very kind of loose governmental strength. They don't have a strong government right now. There was already pressure on the current prime minister to step down or make some really big changes. And that led to Ukraine now having the first Jewish prime minister, which is interesting because at least some of the information on Ukraine points to Ukraine being a very anti-Semitic place. Not just the history of it, but recent history. Not a very friendly to open Jew place.
The Soviet society built that up where your ethnic background, your social background, your religious background, those are evil imperialist capitalist ideas you're taking with you into the society, so we need to root them out. So even though it's been 20 years since that ended, I don't think that the society can change that quickly, especially without a lot of force behind it. I mean, that's really partially what a lot of the Eurofication of Ukraine is about. It's not about integrating their economy because their economy is already integrated. It's about changing them socially to be more Euro-like, and that is why it is such an important battleground. It's not about the, oil or gas transit. It's not about the resources. It's not about the manufacturing. It's about the identity of the nation.
The culture, the way people think about these, their lives, their issues. That's really what this could be about.
I think there's a big, the divide in the Cold War was not a divide based on a traditional model. We don't have any type of ancient blood feud in the West with the East, and there was no resource contention or anything like that. It was purely ideological and identity. And so that conflict was fought purely for those motivations for that long. It's still going on, even though the Soviet Union collapsed, and that part of the world did take steps forward into the integration with the greater world. They're still not totally integrated. You look at nations like Belarus and Russia, and they seem to be intentionally isolationist. They don't want to integrate. They want to be a part of the system, but they don't want to be subject to it. And it's all about getting all of these holdouts into the system. So Ukraine is just sort of the front line right now.
Right. The Baltic states are already fallen into a more Eurocentric culture
Right.
and political unions. The U.S. is defending them, so their military alliances have shifted.
Central Europe is all on board now.
They're part of the EU, formerly. They used euros. They were part of this migrant crisis, right? They tried to accept migrants, even though culturally they can't. Culturally they're rejecting it. How about that? This is not about their ability to accept migrants, rather their willingness to.
Right. That's an important part of Eurofication. And I think it's like a test that they have to periodically do to enforce, this idea. Where every once in a while, as a nation state of the Euro, you have to do something that you don't want to do, and you have to get your people to go along with it. And it's sort of a part of the health of the system, because if this didn't happen every so once in a while, the governments would grow complacent, the people would grow more powerful, and eventually they would drop out of the Euro. So you have to constantly be manufacturing these crises where you're stamping down people everywhere. And that's kind of just part of being an empire. That's how you keep people in line.
So let's look at the Brexit, because it is coming up, I think, in June. I think, yes, the vote is in just a month and a half away. Now, the British seem to be less directly affected by the migrant crisis, right? But they are still taxed fairly heavily, several $billions a year. That doesn't go back into the UK, as well as certain future obligations that they might not want to really take on, military intervention, sanctions, etc. Does that fit that same model of this is, even for the UK, this is still one of these tests? This is the Eurozone.
Oh, absolutely. This is the desired outcome of the migrant crisis, because it sets all these precedents. If you can engineer this situation where you give the people who are powerful and don't want to be a part of the EU the choice to take it to a referendum, and then it fails because either the majority of the people don't want it or because you control the election and can rig it, once it fails, it sets the precedent that for the next 5 or 10 years or whatever, this issue is settled. We had a referendum. Everything is good. We have to wait, a whole turnover in the government, really, to have this debate again. And of course, they know they're going to win.
Well, how do they know they're going to win? I mean, polling could suggest that, but beforehand, is because the choice of Brexit is potentially so much riskier?
It's because politicians are narcissistic.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Disassembled Podcast.
The Disassembled Podcast was produced by Travis Razor and John Schwartz. For more of our shows, go to disassembledpodcast.com, where we also have links to contact us and find us on social media. Please subscribe and give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Facebook. We value the feedback of our audience and look forward to hearing from you.